What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the BK Nothing But Nets podcast. I am your host today, Nets Press, also known as Dylan. Dylan, also known as Nets Press, whatever you want to say. Here with my co-host Gary, and we have a very special guest here today, one of many for this offseason, and hopefully a reoccurring guest throughout the process of the offseason. Dusty Garza, aka the Spurs reporter. What's going on, man? How are you?
Great. You use the term special very loosely.
Well, listen,
Thank
you know
you
what?
for
We
that.
we, we don't do many reporters on, so you're the first actually this year that we've had on. And I
Awesome,
know
man.
that there's been a ton of dialogue between the Nets and the Spurs, so I'm glad that we were able to get you on and find a time that worked best for all of us.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we appreciate you for joining.
Thank you for having me, man. It's an honor. It's a pleasure to meet you guys and to actually put faces to the people that I've been communicating with and talking Nets and Spurs basketball with for a while. So it's great to be here. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. And yeah, like you brought up, we've been talking now for almost a full year. We were kind of going over it in the backstage area and discussing, when the Cam Johnson rumors were originally beginning with San Antonio. But before we get into any of our topics for today, if you want to just give a quick breakdown of, how long you've been with the Spurs, what you do with the Spurs, and kind of give us your credibility on some of the things that you've been able to discuss throughout the season this year. I know that you were one of the first people to break De'Aaron Fox in San Antonio. So just give us a quick little breakdown of what you do with the Spurs, so this way our uh, watchers
Well,
can get a
I
good idea.
started covering the team when I was in college still, I think. And I happened to, the internet was in its infancy where it was just a bunch of nerds and people who could actually even communicate in Unix because you had to know Unix to communicate. And I happened to run into a guy who had an access point to the internet. And this was a time when mostly just universities and think tanks and stuff like that were on the net. And I started writing. I just started what we would call blogging about the Spurs. I was in the Los Angeles area and keeping up with my favorite team back home. And this was a good excuse to do that. I'd watch the games on TV whenever they were on TV or listen on the radio. And I'd, write commentary. And then eventually I ended up befriending a guy who was an assistant coach at the time named R.C. Buford. And R.C. communicated with me via email, and we started a friendship. And before long, he would come on scouting trips, and I'd meet up with him. And I remember going to a scouting session where he was scouting Brian Scalabrine at USC, which is where I went to school. And so, that shows how long ago this was. Eventually, the Spurs started winning championships, and I was continuing. I started this thing called Spurs Report, which was the name of the blog that was on the internet on Unix. And then eventually the World Wide Web came along, and we started a forum and sort of a news site, and that developed. And I continued to grow my experience in the sports world. I was producing the Big West basketball conference games back before ESPN and everybody else got into the game. We were producing television broadcast games for the Big West Conference, and I started doing color commentary for those games and executive producing them for years. And in the meantime, continuing to write about the Spurs and growing our Spurs Report community. We eventually moved to Facebook. We have about 41,000 fans on that Facebook group that is, sort of a place where people can come in and discuss breaking news, share rumors, talk about Spurs basketball 24/7. And then last year, I had an opportunity for the first time to cover the Spurs in person, and I came to San Antonio to do it. And it was a situation that I needed to be here for family. There was some stuff going on, and so I came. This is the first year I've actually covered the Spurs in person, and it's been an exciting year, spending time with the team, going to practices, obviously going to just about every game. And doing it live and in person is very different than having done it from such a distance where usually back then, the only time you'd get to see the team in person is whether they come to play a game with the Lakers or the Clippers or during the playoffs. So it gives you a different perspective. It's funny, I guess, from a big market to a small market, you come in and you deal with media in a very different way. In Los Angeles and New York, which I've spent a lot of time in New York as well, the media is very, very different than it is here. Definitely. Here, it's definitely a different, unique situation. So I've had to kind of feel my way around, but yeah, I pride myself in trying to cover the team in a way that hasn't been done before. And jumping on Twitter last year for the first time. And we all know Twitter can just be, hate central,
yep.
The wild, wild west. So that's been a challenge, but it's been a lot of fun. And I'm looking at other opportunities that have presented themselves, so that I may be doing more NBA general stuff than just the Spurs, but I will probably continue to cover the Spurs.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, listen, let's get right into our first topic, because I know that you're on a pretty quick time frame here. So let's go back into last offseason, where you and I first started speaking in regards to the Spurs Nets rumors around Cam Johnson. Originally, from what we had spoken about, it was Keldon Johnson potentially being the piece, plus a pick, maybe two. What are those conversations that you overheard in regards to the Cam Johnson rumors? Was a deal ever close to being done? Is this still something that they view as a viable option if they miss out on a player such as Giannis or Zion or KD? What do you see San Antonio's connection with Cam Johnson heading into this offseason?
Cam Johnson has a lot of fans in San Antonio. There's a lot of Spurs fans who love the idea since it first broke last year. And I think actually, Dylan, you were one of the first people that broke that rumor. And then eventually, like within days, we started seeing it in newspapers and people even attributing you to being the source for having some insight on that. And that rumor, grew legs as time progressed over the following weeks. The sense that we got, because the Spurs won't tell you anything, they're so good at keeping their cards close to their vest that you're left with kind of finding out from other people and discussing with perhaps even other media folks, what they know. And at the time, what we found out was, the desire for a trade was, the availability of that trade was real. In other words, the Nets were probably, open to shopping Cam. The idea that San Antonio would part with Keldon Johnson, who is the easiest target when rumors come up. Like everybody looks at Cam, especially back then, even during the year this year, when a trade rumor comes up, everybody always says, "Oh, Keldon." Because Keldon was making, a good, nice, not a lot, but a nice chunk of change. And he seems to be, to people outside, a dispensable, type of asset that you can replace or whatever. But the Spurs were pretty clear from what I gathered that, if you're going to make a trade using an asset like Keldon, who is a really important locker room presence and a glue type of guy, I often describe Keldon as part minister, part shepherd, and part comedian. He's really, really a great leader. This kid was a National Honor Society guy. He's very intelligent. He's a good communicator, but he's always cracking jokes in the locker room. And everybody knows that, Keldon is crazy. So if you're going to get rid of a guy like that, you really have to make sure that you're getting something back that's going to be of value. And what it kind of, at that time, what the conversation was is, aren't you kind of trading an apple for an apple? What are you really improving by bringing in Cam and his skill set compared to Keldon, and there was not a lot of difference. So whether the Spurs were ever serious about that trade, I doubt, only because later on, you know, there was a sort of some discussions about the group of players that San Antonio wants to move forward with, the core group of players, and Keldon was in that core group of players. So even though we heard lots of rumors, Keldon's value to the team is important. Doesn't mean that if the right opportunity comes along and you're able to trade an apple for a gold bar, that won't happen. But in that case, it was apple for apple, and it doesn't. The similarities were such statistically and otherwise that it wasn't compelling enough for San Antonio. But of course, we know from the net side that there was definitely some traction to the rumors. And then that happened all season, just the same way that it did with Keldon, right? All these rumors, and then nothing ended up happening.
Yeah.
However, you and I know, and Gary, we were all talking about the fact that there'll probably be a lot of player movement this summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I were talking about it. There's probably about 5 or 6 stars that are, you know, more likely than not to be moved this offseason with the, you know, restrictions to the new CBA, just certain teams looking to get a reset, especially teams that have their picks this year and next year. You know, some of the names that we were mentioning in regards to San Antonio, guys like Giannis, KD, Zion. Let's just say that there is a world where, you know, Kevin Durant's in Houston, somehow OKC gets knocked out early and they go for Giannis. Do you see a route where if they miss out on one or two of those big names, they circle back closer to, you know, draft night or just, you know, as the free agency period starts? Do they come and circle back looking for a Cam Johnson, especially with players like Harrison Barnes being on an expiring contract, you know, Jeremy Sochan being on an expiring contract? Where do you see San Antonio's stance on a Cam Johnson move this offseason compared to, you know, passing on him at the trade deadline?
Well, you know, the rumors haven't gone away. I'm seeing already people talking again about Cam and San Antonio and stuff. I think it's too early to tell. I think once we know what's going to happen with the picks and the lottery, then we'll get a better sense of what's going to happen. I did a deep dive the other day. I haven't written about it yet, but I wanted to see theoretically how much money the Spurs make in profits every year. Because I'll tell you, one of the things that jumped out at me about this season was you'd go to the Frost Bank Center and it was near capacity every night. Didn't matter who you were playing. And usually you see that when you play the bigger teams, the more exciting games. But there was a lot of people at games this year. The city is chomping at the bit. They want to win. There was a promise, or at least there was some hope that we might make the playoffs this year. And then obviously the injuries happened and things didn't line up. But the franchise is turning around. When you look at the profits that the team makes, which let's just say $350 million a year. Okay, that's a pretty good guess from what I can gather, which takes into account, you know, tickets and merchandise and so on and so forth. They're going to be doubling that profit with the new TV money coming in. In other words, we know that the salary cap is only going to increase 10%, right? The league did that on purpose, and they worked it out with the players union, and it's going to be 10%, then another 10, then another 10. So in 5 years or whatever it is, it'll be 50%. Right, higher than where we are now, which is insane when you look at a salary cap situation. That's a lot of money. But in the meantime, the teams are going to be taking in the profits from that television deal. And I am guessing that, just doing the math on a very basic level, the Spurs will be doubling the profit that they're making, or that they've been making the last few years. That puts an onus on the possibility that the Spurs will try to find a way to land a $50 million plus year player, and that they won't be too uncomfortable paying that, would be my guess, because that's not something we're used to seeing in San Antonio. Even even in the Tim Duncan days, David Robinson days, those guys were taking pay cuts to make the salary cap work and for the sake of the team and building the team around you. That may still be the mentality, but what I'm saying is you're going to have the possibility of something like that happening where you still got Victor on his rookie scale. You've got other players at very manageable pay levels, and that you might be able to move some of those players, like let's just say a Devin Vassell or a Keldon Johnson, for the opportunity to land a big star, in addition to De'Aaron Fox, who's already in house and who's going to be getting an extension this summer as well, is very possible. And I think you're right in saying, if they miss out on a bigger star, do they circle back around and look at other players? And the answer is absolutely yes. However, knowing the Spurs and how good their scouting department is and the tools that they have, they work with some incredible analytics tools and stuff, and they know they're very good at finding undervalued players that they can bring in to the system. What I mean is we won't be able to tell until after the lottery what their approach is going to be. It's going to really depend on how good those lottery picks are. Yeah. For two reasons. Number one, are you going to get, let's say, they have a 26% chance of landing a top 4 pick. Can you get a top 4 player? If you do, that's a really nice piece that you can add to this group, and that will definitely help dictate what other need or what other star you might bring in if you still need one. And then you have Atlanta's pick, which we're finding out tonight, whether that's going to be a lottery pick or not. Or not tonight, tomorrow night. If Atlanta loses to Miami, then that pick that they owe us becomes a lottery pick as well. So now you got 2 lottery picks. Then it becomes, do we keep those lottery picks or do we package them and trade them for a star? So that's why I'm saying, I think it's going to depend on how all of that plays out. But I have full confidence. I can say that, and not many fans can say this about their front office. I have full confidence that knock on wood, but that the front office is going to do the right thing and help build this team into, hopefully quicker than we expect, a contender. The interesting thing to me is the other 2 teams you mentioned. You mentioned Houston and you mentioned OKC. OKC has a lot of assets too, and they can certainly go after big people, big players, right? And Giannis is a very interesting name to me. We have a feeling that Giannis is, the championship window there has either closed or it's very close to closing. And depending on what happens with them in their first round matchup against the Pacers here, a 4 versus 5 series where the Bucks won 3 of the 4 games they played this year. And now we got Dame Lillard coming back from his blood clot, which is, kind of scary, but at the same time, like interesting as a storyline too. But let's just say if the Bucks lose that series, I think it would be a safe bet that Giannis, and just because of the fact that they don't have many assets left in Milwaukee, and the fact that they've traded away a lot of players and sort of kind of traded away their future, that he may want out and want to go to a contender. So that becomes a really interesting piece that a lot of people are not necessarily, thinking that may happen. Sacramento is another one where we see a guy like Sabonis who could be a really nice piece for any team becoming available. I don't think they'll deal with the Spurs again, because we just took advantage of that whole De'Aaron Fox situation really tremendously. But you have other players like that are not necessarily, the superstar players that could be really, really good on other teams who may be shifting zip codes. You mentioned Trae Young. Trae was a guy who all summer, if you remember Dylan last year, that was like the number one rumor. Trade to the Spurs, trade to
Yep.
the Spurs. They can give them their picks back, blah, blah, blah. The Spurs were not interested in Trae Young as much as everybody thought they would be. And the main reason I would think is, again, the analytics. They just show that he, defensively, he was just not going to be a guy that you could go for, especially if somebody like a De'Aaron Fox would become available, right? So the Spurs are looking for a very specific type of player, somebody who plays defense, somebody who can continue to push them into a positionless basketball type of scenario. That's what they really like, is the idea of positionless basketball. So the draft will be the same way. Somebody who can be a positionless player. You got Stephon Castle, who last year we were big proponents of and said, this is the Spurs guy. And you look at him and the guy can play the 1, the 2, and even the 3 position. That's what the Spurs are looking for, some versatility, especially on the defensive side. One of the other storylines is, you mentioned him, what's going to happen with Jeremy Sohan? He's up for a rookie extension that he can get as early as this summer. If he doesn't get it, he's a restricted free agent next summer. But, what are the Spurs' plans for him? Could you replace him? Could you find somebody that would take his spot in the draft? The answer is absolutely you could. There's one top 25 draft pick, a prospect right now, who I'm keeping an eye on. I don't want to say who it is yet, but
I'd like to think I have a pretty good idea, because Gary and I, especially me, I've been doing mock drafts now for about 5 months, and there's one player that I really like going to you guys in that, like, whether you trade back or you stay at that 12 through 16 range, wherever that Hawks pick may end up. But there's definitely a guy, not a freshman, I'll say that, but a guy that I think is an immediate plug-in player for you. Reminds me a lot of Naz Reid. I'm assuming some people can get the hint, but
I wanted to ask you a question. Can I get in for a second? I do want to ask you a question. The Spurs are a team that have a ton of assets. They have Fox, but then they have Wemby and the younger guys, Castle. Is it the temperament in San Antonio? Is it win next year, or is it more of a long-term plan? And because I'm saying, like, Fox to me doesn't really. Fox is a great player, but he's not exactly on the same time span as the other guys. Is it win this year, or is it, look, we got Wemby, we've got Castle, we got 2 lottery picks potentially. We're going to be good for a very long time. What's kind of the sentiment in San Antonio?
It depends who you ask. If you ask the television networks who just spent all that money, the billions of dollars to get the Spurs on television, there are a couple of things in play. Wemby is a ratings magnet. They love the ratings when they play Wemby on television, internationally especially. And the league loves it too. So you got the league pushing for more Spurs televised games. You got the ratings. The people want to see Wemby. What they don't want to see, and what's happened a lot in the last couple of years, is the Spurs not winning when they're on television. And in fact, many times getting blown out on national televised games. So we know that puts an onus on winning now, right? Then you got the Spurs management who say, look, we're not going to take any shortcuts. We're going to build a contender that's going to be able to win for a while, and you can't rush that. We want to take the Oklahoma City type approach. And then you got the fans who say, no, you got to win now because, and the networks also say this, you got to win now because you're going to lose Wemby. Wemby's going to get tired of losing. And then you got Wemby, and Wemby says, look, man, I trust the team. I know what we're planning, and I'm all in. Like, I'm not in a hurry. So I hate to answer your question, Gary, that way, but that is the best way to give you like the whole picture of what's going on. And my sense is, like you saw with the De'Aaron Fox situation, that if the opportunity presents itself where the team can pounce on the right player and bring the right asset in, then you do it, right? You take advantage of it. One of the things that we haven't seen before in the NBA is what Oklahoma City and San Antonio, 2 examples, certainly the Nets to another extent, is you're hoarding all these assets, all these draft picks, right? And you've got this ladder of draft picks and assets that you can trade with. We've never really seen a situation where you're on top of the ladder. Now, how are you going to get off? Because the pressure is now on to try to get rid of some of those assets. Look, this draft, I think we have like 4 picks, 2 in the second round, 2 in the first round. And it's like, man, we don't really need all that. We have such a great development program. There's a couple of guys in the G League that would be great assets to bring in to the NBA team. Do we really need more guys to develop? Do we really want to be locked in to 2 number 1 or 2 first round picks at the price we're going to be paying? Those are all things that are up in the air. But again, I trust what San Antonio is going to do. Last year was a similar situation. We had 2 first round picks. We ended up trading the second one for a 2031 draft pick out of Minnesota. And the analysts behind the scenes, the guys who were looking at forward in time to see what's going to happen, what's going to be value of those picks, et cetera, were ecstatic when Minnesota called and said, hey, we're interested. We'll take you up on that trade. The guys in the back room were jumping up and down saying, yeah, do it. We'll take that 2031. And so, for us fans, we may not understand the complexities or have all the data points that they do, but they definitely do. And that's why I say I completely trust Brian Wright and the front office guys. What's an even better question, Gary, is what's going to happen? How does that fit into what's happening with our coaching situation? Because Pop is likely, he wants to come back. He wants to be the leader of the team that he built, that he's been in charge of. He's, obviously one of the greatest coaches. But the reality of his physical situation, of his illness, may not allow him to come back. That's a very, very serious, possibility. And it's one that we've been talking to fans about for a while, that, hey, we know that you love Pop, and Pop definitely deserves to be back in front, but he may not be able to. And what doctor is going to sign off on him coming back to a stressful situation like coaching an NBA team after having a stroke? Not many. So when you look at just the facts without revealing, or getting into the personal medical stuff that's going on, which is really kind of none of our business, you have to look at the reality of that. And there are people in the Spurs front office who are saying, hey, we need a decision, because there's so many, all of a sudden there's like this influx of really good coaches that are available. Do we make a move for one of those guys to replace Pop? Are we going to stay and continue with Mitch Johnson? Wemby the other day said during his final press conference on the way out for the season, he said, I believe in Mitch. I can see him growing into that job. And there are other people in the Spurs organization who want Mitch, right? But then there are other people who say, we don't really we want like somebody who really has experience, who's maybe won championships, or who can take us to that next level that you're talking about, Gary. So it's going to be a really interesting, and I think that decision will be made hopefully before the end of the playoffs, if not right at the end of the playoffs, where we're going to know, okay, Pop's coming back, or we need to look elsewhere, or we're going to stick with Mitch Johnson, while we wait for Pop some more. But this is a key piece of the puzzle that I think historically we're going to be looking back on. Whatever decision is made here is going to affect the franchise in a big, big, big way. And that may affect whether or not we're building into a contender sooner than later, and whether or not Wemby will stay. That's how important this decision is.
No, definitely. I know that there was also talks, it's Becky Hammond, right, that he brought in as an assistant a while back. Is there any opportunity for her to potentially take that spot? I know people within the Spurs organization have spoke very highly of her as well. I know Mike Malone recently getting fired. That could be another name that'll be linked to you guys. Is there anybody outside of Mitch Johnson that you can see potentially being the replacement for Popovich if they decide to go a different route?
The 3 guys who were recently let go are all possible replacements. Taylor Jenkins has he started his career in San Antonio for all purposes. This is NBA career because he coached the Austin Spurs, the G League team, kind of cut his teeth, coaching that group. Knows the development system extremely well, has kept in touch with people in the Spurs organization. As a matter of fact, one of the guys that he brought to Minnesota over the offseason last year was a Spurs guy who was very innovative. I can't remember his name right now, but he was very innovative with running offenses and so forth. And when they came in and incorporated those changes, guess what? Minnesota was winning. Like, they were kicking butt. They were like number 1, number 2 in the West, right? But then
Memphis had a huge run this past season before Ja's injury, so they definitely made some
and
moves
that was
this
because of the Spurs ties, the Spurs, innovation or whatever. They took that piece, inserted it into Minnesota, and Jenkins did that, and everybody was brought in until somebody wasn't brought in. And I'm not pointing any fingers, but somebody was not content at the way the offense was no longer just running through Ja. And then things kind of started falling apart. Eventually, it led to Taylor being out on the outs. So Taylor's a really good guy. I considered him before he was fired, and I've gotten to speak to and meet these coaches, before every game you get a chance to talk to them and so forth. I considered Taylor a top 5 coach. I think he's a very, very, very good coach. And he has a presence about him. He's a really tall, kind of big guy, and he walks into a room and people pay attention. So I like that about him a lot. Mike Malone, obviously, a lot of respect between Mike and Pop. You can go on the internet and type in both their names, and you'll see lots of pictures of them interacting and videos, and they like each other very, very much. The problem that I see with Mike is the word is that he doesn't like the younger players. Well, how are you going to bring a guy like Mike in to develop a lot of the young players that are still in San Antonio? Mike likes the veterans, right? So at least that's what we hear. And that was ultimately possibly what was happening with that situation in Denver that got him removed from there. The last guy is a good friend of mine. I love him as a human being, as a person. He's a great coach, but an even better human being. And that's Mike Budenholzer, who was Pop's assistant through all the dynasty years and eventually led Milwaukee to their championship back in 2021, whatever it was. And I really think Mike would be a good guy too. But now Mike's name is like tainted. Like nobody wants to necessarily take him. And he has about 30 million reasons not to take the Spurs job because he's got, that guaranteed money. The last one I'll talk about is Becky because, I just saw, maybe Jock Vaughn would be available. Certainly if a guy like Ime Udoka was available, you would bring in Ime Udoka, even though Ime's got a temperament like Pop, like he can be a real difficult guy to be coached by because he holds everybody very accountable. But Becky was one that, the PR side, the public relations side was all, hunky-dory, everything's great, she's amazing, and she is amazing, right? But the reality is a whole different story. It's not the same level of respect that you think that they had there. At least that's what I hear. I wasn't here covering the team every day, but I heard enough of it where I don't think Becky is in any way a possibility.
Gotcha. And I wanted to circle back one more time on the Cam Johnson topic because after acquiring De'Aaron Fox, many reports stated that in Sacramento, Cam Johnson was a target that De'Aaron Fox wanted very much so to keep him in Sacramento. If that's the case, Brooklyn has picked 26 and 27 later on in the first round. Do you think there's a world where if Brooklyn was to say, here's Cam Johnson and pick 26, would you be able to give us that Atlanta pick and a salary filler? Do you think, even if the star movement hasn't started by draft night, is that something that San Antonio looks to try and get done, knowing that they would still have, Devin Vassell's contract, potentially Jeremy Sochan, players like that to still build a package for a Kevin Durant-like player or a Zion to bring in alongside Cam Johnson and De'Aaron Fox for next season?
Well, it's all about the money, right? So even if the offer were just for something as simple as a pick to get off of Cam Johnson's salary, which I think is that expiring this year, by the way,
No, it's
Billy?
got 2 more years
2 years
left.
left.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
two
you
more
would
years
want
starting
to
next season.
Okay, you would want to move some of your salary out in order to acquire him, because otherwise, then that starts eating into your cap very badly and takes away a huge chunk of your flexibility. So, I think however, that Cam Johnson is definitely a name that we're going to see this summer, and he may be used in the same way that we were talking about using Keldon last year to facilitate a trade, because they make similar money as well, and money right now, clearing up cap space is the name of the game. Flexibility is the name of the game. Uh, I don't, especially because his name was so active in so many rumors during the trade deadline. I don't doubt whatsoever that Cam may go. And I also understand Cam loves being in Brooklyn and loves the community there and playing for the team. But it's a business, and I just don't know, again, like the extent that of interest that San Antonio would have, especially after the transformation that we saw of Keldon Johnson. And I know Keldon's going to be working once again on his 3-point shooting this offseason. I know his coach, and that's one of the things he wants to continue working on. So again, as a fit in San Antonio specifically, it's a difficult fit. But elsewhere, are you kidding me? Like, there's so many teams that would probably love to have him. I'm surprised that more contenders didn't try to go after him to load up with his talent to bring him into the playoffs, the latter part of the year.
Definitely. Yeah, no, there was 11 teams rumored to have been calling in on Cam Johnson at the deadline. I know the 3 that were the most active was the Lakers, Spurs, and Kings, from my knowledge.
Yes.
With Sacramento taking a different approach in moving De'Aaron Fox, they really don't seem to have a need for a Cam Johnson at this point, especially with the questions about Sabonis' future. The Lakers, they missed out on the Mark Williams trade because of his failed physical, so you'd have to think they're moving in the direction of a center this offseason. A lot of those teams that were interested in Cam Johnson may not see that feasible this offseason. If you were to say, just from an outside perspective and an understanding of the game of basketball, with how Brooklyn approached the Cam Johnson rumors and trades and not moving him, especially when, there was rumors about a first-round pick, potentially 2 first-round picks being offered for him by multiple teams.
Crazy.
Do you see them more likely to move off of him by draft night, if not this offseason, or do you see Cam Johnson being a piece that Brooklyn holds on to and tries to build around?
I see him moving. Because you are going to be able to get a better piece if you include him in a trade with some of those assets that you guys have got. So if I were a betting man, I would say more than 50% chance, probably 70% chance that he gets moved, and he gets moved for a more attractive, bigger piece. So I don't see him staying, especially as much interest as he was drawing at the last trade deadline. And really, once the cap kicks up, he becomes more affordable in some ways too for other teams. So I see him as one of the names that may move. I just don't see why Brooklyn would want to hold on to him just for the sake of holding on to him.
Yeah, and that's kind of where some Nets fans, I would say about 75-80% of Nets fans can kind of all agree and say it's probably not best to keep him, simply because let's just say that you do miss out on Giannis this offseason, which I myself have been very vocal on not wanting in Brooklyn. But say you miss out on Giannis this year, you can't add anybody next year. You got a bunch of young guys. Realistically, Johnson's turning 30 by next year. When's the next time that that window of opportunity to win now really comes? What is he, 33, 34 by then? He's on the end of his deal, needs a new deal. It kind of comes to a point where you need to buy into what you're doing. And I feel like that's something that Sean Marks really hasn't done, which is also a big name within the Spurs organization with his upbringing. What are your thoughts on the way that Sean Marks has kind of approached this Nets rebuild, right? He paid a premium to get his picks back. They blew it up within a year of getting James Harden, right? Harden gone. Kyrie requests a trade. He's gone within 4 days. Kevin Durant gone within 4 days after that. Ben Simmons was bought out. The window of winning was officially over after Kyrie and KD got moved. What do you think him handling this situation, especially this past year? Do you trust in Sean Marks to be the guy that can really bring a rebuild to Brooklyn, or do you think that there may be a world where Brooklyn looks to move on from him potentially and replace him with a GM, within the next year or so?
I think Sean has somebody's ear there, and they see the value that he has, probably with that same type of Spurs mentality of, hey, we're driving this bus based on the best maps that are available, the analytics, the data, etc. I really thought that when Sean first got there, man, he was like moving and shaking, making more deals than the Lakers do, like I thought it was a little much. But somehow he's able to survive all of that, which tells me that they value his judgment and they value his intelligence, and that he's putting a product on the floor that is making the team money one way or another. One of the things that people don't consider when you talk about a GM, and we'll use Dallas as a situation, like as an extreme example of this, what Nico has done in Dallas, or what happened with Dallas, Nico, and the Luka situation, is it has ended up not only affecting the winning on the floor, but it has also affected the winning financially in Dallas. Dallas has taken some really, really hard hits financially in the millions of dollars with sponsorships and opportunities and stuff that they are now missing on because Luka's gone. And so when you look at that situation in a wonderful market like Brooklyn, which was like state of the art a couple of years ago, everybody wanted to go there, the new beautiful center, right on the outskirts of New York. I mean, there's just so much going on there. You got to look at that aspect, and whatever has happened in Brooklyn has not cost them financially. In fact, you would argue that their financial situation has actually improved, right? With this, and obviously their asset management is just doing okay. And then the last part of it is, who are you going to replace them with? Like, good GMs are hard to find. So I think you're going to hold on to Sean Marks, and they're going to watch and see how it plays out. One of the theoretical things that a GM can do is you can kind of kick the can down the road a little bit and wait for things to play out. But I don't think Sean has done that. I think he's actually really planning carefully to build Brooklyn into a powerhouse team again, probably with a lot more intelligence and patience than he had before. Because it was like when he got there, it was like a win now, hurry up
Yeah,
thing.
we had no picks because they were all in Boston. You kind of had to make ends meet with late first, second round picks through free agency and restricted free agency. So it was definitely and that's the thing, right? I mean, I've been a Nets fan my entire life, Gary, for 30 plus years. Like, looking at what he was able to do when he didn't have picks and seeing the way that he was very well at drafting, hidden gems later on, whether it was, role players, high caliber role players, players who were starting in the NBA, borderline all-stars. Like, do you think that he is going to stay the course? When you pay as much as you did, right? When you look back at the Rockets trade, you gave up 3 picks that Houston will now likely have that are lottery picks from Phoenix, knowing that KD is going to be gone, Beal could be bought out. Who knows what happens with Booker? I know they're talking about a 2-year extension, but when does he request his trade? When do they feel it's not beneficial anymore to hold on to him because they can't contend? So you gave up 3 high-end Phoenix picks plus a Mavericks pick that 6 months later turned out to be potentially one of the most valuable picks in basketball in 2029. When you look at that, does that kind of give you the reassurance that Brooklyn will take the 2-year approach and rebuild, especially with how good this draft class is this year and next year, or do you see them jumping on the first opportunity of a Giannis if they get any form of word that he wants to play in Brooklyn?
Where do you guys stand in your pick situation right now?
Currently, we have the 6 overall odds. We have pick number 20 via Milwaukee, and then we also have 26, 27, and 36 currently. 26
Man,
and 27 is New York and Houston.
Sean's gonna have fun with those. You guys are gonna get some good players, and or you may see him move one or two of those, because right now, like, the hot thing for other teams who have traded away their future is how do we get draft picks back? Yeah. So I think Sean is in a position that he's going to create some magic, and I think we have to give him the next year or two to see how it plays out. It's going to be pretty evident pretty quickly, though, what's going to happen here in the next few months,
Yeah. And I think that's been the biggest problem with Marks over the past 4 years specifically, right? He was able to get out of purgatory with no picks by bringing in KD and Kyrie. Me personally, I was a big Kyrie guy growing up in Jersey. I actually had a good relationship with him where he was following me on Instagram at one point. We were DMing on a monthly basis. I got close to his team. He was sending shoes out there, the whole 9 yards. Like, I got very close with Kyrie. And when you saw the end of that situation happen, it kind of seemed like Marks gave up on the team after trading for Harden, where he refused to move on from certain pieces. He refused to make the necessary upgrades to continue to succeed. And now you're kind of in a position where everything's reset. You have the draft capital that you've always dreamed of, but we're still somehow in these rumors of accelerating the rebuild and going for guys like Giannis. Even if you are to go for a guy like Giannis, realistically, who's the next step? Like, you're not really contending with just Giannis on this current team, because knowing what you would have to give up, right, of a likely package of Cam Thomas, Nick Claxton, 5-6 first-round picks potentially, because if you look at the age and the level of play that Giannis is currently on, it's the exact age and level of play that James Harden was on when we got him. Right? And you gave up 4 unprotected firsts, 4 first-round swaps, 3 players, one being Jared Allen, one being Karis LeVert. You gave up a ton for a player of Giannis's nature just 3-4 years ago. What kind of puts them in the position to do so and feel that they can succeed by adding a secondary star, if that even comes to fruition, by going after a guy like Giannis?
Well, and that, again, like, what's going to happen with Giannis? It's a big, big question. Does he become available? Is he the right fit? Look, there's going to be other players that are good players that are available. Has there been any discussion about going after potentially somebody like a Trae Young or somebody else that you can build around there with those assets? Because that's a key piece. You're right. You're going to need to probably bring in a star, a good player that you can start building around even more in the net situation, so that you can not necessarily just kick the can up the road, but actually start getting traction and building a winner, right? Have there been any discussions that you can share regarding what potential stars might be available other than Giannis?
From my understanding with Brooklyn, at least, they haven't had their eyes on anybody outside of Giannis. It sounds like it's Giannis or rebuild, but that's the problem to me, is if Giannis is a guy that you have in your sights and that you would realistically, in a sense, ruin the rebuild for, who's the next piece to add him? Because Giannis doesn't win you a championship just by himself, right? So
that's exactly right. And it also affects whether Giannis would want that trade to a non-contender, because all the rumors and the sort of backseat talk is that if he's going to want out, he's going to want to win right away. So that's
kind of why I've been linking him to OKC and San Antonio most. Those are really the only 2 teams that I see with cap space, with the contracts necessary to match up with the youth that'll intrigue the Bucks in making a deal, while also having the draft capital to do so. I mean, if you look at OKC, they could move on from, let's just say they do get the 76ers pick, right? Whether it's 7, 8, or 9. If they were able to move that 4 or 5 future firsts, along with guys like Nikola Topic, Isaiah Hartenstein as a salary filler, and a player like either Isaiah Joe or Aaron Wiggins, like, that's an intriguing package.
That is.
To me personally, if OKC is willing to go all in, I think it's still safe to just go Isaiah Hartenstein, Jalen Williams, Nikola Topic, and a salary filler. I think that gives Milwaukee enough youth. Jalen Williams is already a solidified all-star in this league as a second option on OKC. Who knows what he does as a first option in Milwaukee? But to me, it doesn't really make sense, one, for the Nets to make the move simply because they don't have the roster to do anything within the next year or so. And two, is there really a package that Brooklyn has that beats out a package from San Antonio or OKC? And to me, I don't see that.
That was my biggest thing, is if there are any other teams, especially San Antonio or Detroit, have any interest in Freak or Zion, there's no chance the Nets get them. They simply don't have a package that's attractive. Plus, they're so far off from being competitive. Putting Freak on the Nets, they're not even as good as Milwaukee is right now. So
right.
I know Freak has talked about he wanting to play in big markets and all the Euros playing in big markets, which sounds great. It was just like putting him here does what for our franchise? Like, I get it opens up a window, but he's 31. We're fighting against time here, and we're probably going to have to trade all of our picks to land him. The timing of it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, we also have to look at where Sean Marks comes from, right? Where he learned the business of the NBA and what he's learned so far. And I think when you talk about San Antonio and you talk about Sam Presti, you're talking about not taking shortcuts. You're talking about being on point and building for a specific reason and being on track for the win, for the payoff. And I think that's kind of what Sean has done now. Like they put their cards all in, they tried to win, it couldn't happen. Now they're kind of more conservative and they're plotting carefully, right, what the next move is. And that means that you're going to have to take slow steps moving up. I just don't see Sean grabbing a big star that's ready to move to a contender, that's ready to win. I just don't see that as a possibility. However, Milwaukee's got a nice hand to play here, and they can do perhaps what San Antonio did a couple years ago and start assembling that core group that you're going to let play together and get experience together. And I know that may not be what fans want to hear in New Jersey, but over and over, we've seen examples of you can't just build a super team and win. And for heaven's sake, like Brooklyn is one of those examples. You can't just do that. It doesn't work that way. You can't take shortcuts. You have to build carefully, slowly, methodically, and logically. And I think that's where you guys are as far as the net situation. Bringing in somebody like a Zion, well, shoot, if you can get him at a discount, why not, right? It would make him it would benefit him to get another scene in his life, a change of scenario. We see what he's capable of when he gets focused and when he has the right people around him, training him, feeding him correctly, etc. I mean, he had a really nice bounce this past year. And much of it was financially motivated. But if you put him in a situation like Brooklyn, where I know Sean also is a fan of that type of environment, the recovery and taking care of your body and so on and so forth, that might be a really good situation for Zion. And that's a guy that you can probably take who's not going to insist on, I need to go to a contender. But that's why I was asking, what other players' names have come out? Because there's just going to be so many possible good players that are available.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, Trae Young sounds like he's a definite move. Ja Morant, there's a financial issue in Memphis, and with the way that his injuries have been over the past couple of years and the attitude that he has causing some of these suspensions, it definitely seems like Memphis could be in a position to try and move him. The three main stars that I've had specifically linked to certain teams, I've had KD to Houston, Giannis to OKC, and then Zion to Detroit. I think Detroit and Zion just makes a ton of sense. They're kind of in that position where you have your solidified superstar in Cade Cunningham, and adding somebody of Zion's nature, if he can stay healthy. I mean, that's a very fun duo to see in Detroit. But to me, I would say Zion, KD, Giannis, Trae Young, Ja, and then Sabonis are probably the main 6 stars that you could potentially see being moved this offseason.
What about I heard at some point some rumors about a Brandon Ingram to you guys. Is that of interest?
he re-signed with
started that
Toronto.
rumor.
Yeah. Brandon Ingram is no longer. I actually had somebody. It's funny that you mentioned this. I had somebody comment to me the other day because I did a mock off season of like what the Nets could do this off season, and somebody was like, "Oh, trade for Brandon Ingram." Like, you do realize that he got traded to Toronto, didn't play a game, and signed a 4-year extension. He's not going anywhere. Like they're gonna be keeping him. So I don't see Brandon Ingram being an option. I mean, does he become available if they somehow land Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey? I don't think so.
Right, that's true.
But yeah, I don't see Ingram being an option this offseason.
Not only that, but he's hard to move with that money he makes too.
Yeah, I want to see he's getting what 40-ish something million a year on a 4-year deal. It's definitely not something that a team that's looking to win now really wants. So those are probably the main 6 players I can see being moved. From Sean Marks's postseason press conference, it seemed that it was Giannis or nothing. Like LaMelo has kind of at his postseason conference, he kind of said he trusts what Charlotte's doing. He wants to stay with Charlotte. So I don't think that they're going to look to move him, whether they add a Dylan Harper or not. I think they're going to try and hold on to LaMelo for as long as possible, and rightfully so. I mean, if LaMelo can stay healthy and
that's the biggest question.
Yeah, and if they can land like a VJ Edgecombe or a Cooper Flagg or a Dylan Harper, like they really have something going for them there with their potential top 4 pick, LaMelo, Brandon Miller. I don't think you're moving on from Mark Williams anymore because of the failed physical. I don't think a team's going to be willing to take the risk, and even if they are, you're going to have to get rid of him practically for free, which I also don't see them doing, unless if you draft a Kaman Malawak or a Derek Queen. So it kind of puts them in a position where they need to focus on who they have, draft really well, and hopefully put themselves in a position to trade for a star at some point. I mean, I think Zion's another good fit for a team like Charlotte. That's been rumored in the past because of the relationship between him and LaMelo going all the way back to high school. So I could definitely see there being options there.
And it's interesting that you mentioned some of those rookies and stuff too, because if you draft some good rookies, and there will be some good rookies available for sure at every place where you've talked about the Nets have picks. There's some even that are flying under the radar that are going to be, late first rounders from what I can see that are amazing players that are projecting to be very good professional players. But it's about money. We have to remember the business is about putting fans in the seats and making money, whether it be through television deals like we're going to see or through sponsorship deals or whatever. And I think that's another reason you hold on to a Sean Marks, because again, through all of that tumult and change and so forth, the Nets have still been making money, and they're going to make more. Like everybody's going to make more money this coming year, not just the Spurs. So that buys you time, and that buys you assets and flexibility a little bit. So I
think that's kind of where like my fandom comes more into play, right? When you look at the business end of it, do you want to sell and do you want to have packed arenas? Yes, but at the same time, as a fan, it almost becomes a slap in the face when you see the stadium being filled with majority opposing team fans and business trips and people coming to visit from other countries to come to New York and just stopping by a game. Like, at some point, do you think the Nets look into that and are like, okay, it's great that we're making this money, but why are we not targeting a fan base? Why are we not trying to build? Because they always use this term in Brooklyn with culture and grit and New York, but they never seem to really try and attract a fan base to get to these games. Do you think that ever comes into play where it's they want to take the rebuild route, so you give Nets fans something they've never had, which is a homegrown star? Like Jason Kidd wasn't a homegrown star. Vince Carter, we traded for, wasn't a homegrown star, right? Like Kenyon Martin was the first overall pick, but never really was like a superstar caliber player. The only player that you've drafted in the lottery that's considerably anything special in Nets history is Brook Lopez over the past 25 years. And, he played 7-8 years here. He's the all-time leading scorer. He's been gone for 10 plus years, and we still haven't had anybody of his nature come here. So At some point,
It's,
do you think they kind of put the business end of it to the side and
no,
try and
you
focus on the
can't.
fan base?
You can't put it aside, especially in
Yeah.
that market. I was talking to some Toronto fans the other day who were telling me that they're used to going to New York or to Brooklyn to see the Raptors play from Canada because it's actually cheaper to do that. You can get better seats and enjoy the game and the festivities more than if you stay in Toronto to catch a game. I was like, what? That's crazy.
Yeah.
But you look at that environment and the market that New York is and by default Brooklyn. And that's not going to change. I mean, I'm sure on any given night you go to the New York Knicks game and you see some of the same type of activity where you got a lot of fans from other teams coming to play there at the mecca of basketball. So, and again, like that's what this business is about, right? Making money. So if they're making money, they're not going to be uncomfortable enough to change that anytime soon. The hope would be obviously from a fan's perspective that they do, but the Nets and the Nets franchise has always kind of been like that. I mean, I don't know, was it any different when they were playing the Meadowlands or whatever?
Instead of having opposing teams fans there, it was just 4,000 Nets fans. Like it was and that's kind of like where my bias comes into play. And Gary's kind of said it too, and I'm gonna pass it to him here in a second. But yeah, like I would prefer that almost. Like I would prefer a very very limited group of fans in the arena, but them actually cheering on our team. Yeah, because that's to me how you build a fan base, right? Like 'cause you have to start from somewhere. But if you're just kind of bringing in random people off the streets, people who are coming to visit New York, people from opposing teams fans. Like I think Detroit's doing it very well. They're not allowing Knicks fans at the Pistons home games. And I think that's something that's great because like you want to have that home advantage, that feeling of this is our home, we're playing for our fans, let's go out there and get a win. Like that's to me how you build up players' morale and being in the cities that they're in. When you have, a Knicks versus Nets game in Brooklyn and 90% of the arena is Knicks fans, that's a little bit of a problem, right? When you play the Lakers and I'm walking around and I'm seeing, more LeBron jerseys than I am a Cam Thomas jersey, that's a little weird. Like, how are we not trying to kind of target a fan base, build a fan base? Because the whole point of moving from Jersey to Brooklyn was, one, to financially become a higher market, and two, because you felt like you didn't have enough fans in New Jersey. But when you look at kind of the sample size of when they went to Jersey, the front office, and how they handled, merchandising, marketing, there was no marketing for the Nets when they were in Jersey. So it's not really like they were going and trying to find a fan base. And it's kind of similar in Brooklyn. Like you talk about the Brooklyn grit and all this, but you're still not targeting fans to kind of fill that arena. And to me, as a fan, I don't know, that's always been a big issue for me. And it definitely makes it much more depressing when you go to games and you're like, you look to your right and you see 7 opposing teams fans, and you look to your left and you see 5 opposing fans with 3 businessmen there. And I'm just like, all right, you know what? I'm just going to wear my Nets jersey and be the minority in my own arena, whatever.
Right.
It's been a tough, like it's been, like Dylan said, I used to go to games in the Meadowlands all the time, and you could hear echoes, right? There was like 4,000 people, but there were Net fans. They were passionate the same way Knicks fans or Mets and Yankee fans. They were passionate. They love their team. You go there now, there's really not another Net fan inside. I remember I was there this season. I flew in to go watch my pathetic Nets play, right? And I'm sitting there, and it was the day the Knicks were playing, and then it was also the Cavs versus the Thunder. I'm not joking. A third of the people were watching either the Knicks game or the Cavs Thunder game on their phones while the Nets game was going on.
Crazy.
Like, yeah. And Dylan talked about how something like 60% or so of the fans are walk-up fans. I mean, they just buy their tickets.
Yeah, from the Nets. Yeah. When I went through the interview process for like the sales position with the Nets, they kind of give you like the breakdown and kind of describe how they market their ticket sales. And over 60% of ticket sales for every game usually comes from same day walk-ups to the ticket booth. And that's
almost like going to a Broadway show, right?
Yeah, like it's a lot of it is not fans. Yeah.
Crazy.
I understand the entertainment and the business end of it to keep up financially, but man, it's like at some point, when are you going to try and take things seriously? Because that's another problem too. certain players, especially stars, they don't want to go somewhere where they're not going to be rooted for by the people in their own arena. Like, you want to be in a position where you can build something and be playing for somebody else as well. Like, I understand the whole money aspect of it, whether it's from players, from owners, from the league, but at some point, that's kind of why I'm on board with just full blown rebuild. Do it for 2 years, be horrible for 2 years. Like, it really, I have the debate all the time with Nets fans. And everybody's like, oh no, go for Giannis, do this, do that. I'm like, you do realize that I've been alive for 23 years. Gary here has been alive much longer than I've been alive. And we each have not seen a championship,
Right.
For the Nets, right? Made 2 finals, but we haven't won anything. So what's 2 more years going to hurt really trying to get the pieces that'll be foundational for the next 10 years? I think that's just kind of the logical answer, especially when you're giving up the package that you did to Houston. Just take 2 years. You got the 2 best draft classes we've probably ever seen in a back-to-back stance, and you have the opportunity to draft in the top 5 of each. So hopefully Mark stays on course and doesn't get blindsided by like a Giannis, because I just don't see an avenue where it works out to where you can win within the next 2-3 years, especially with teams like Boston still high up, Cleveland, bringing back Donovan Mitchell and having their core 4, the Knicks, like, they still have a core and they still have a package to even go out for a star with some of the contracts that they have. So who knows what they do? But to me, it's just not feasible to try and win now. I don't think it's possible.
And not only that, but the league has changed. There's so much parity, guys. There's so much parity right now, and teams. I mean, on the west side of things, man, things were like half a game apart till the final game of the season. Things were shifting around so quickly, so violently. That's a whole different league that we're talking about now. Even if you wanted to just quote unquote win now, good luck with that. Like, it's so difficult. You're going to have to be in purgatory for a little bit longer. And I think Sean's off to a good start. It'll be okay. But instead of saying even 2 years, I'd say give it at least 3, maybe even 4 before you're actually a contender. And but you've got a good guy in the driver's seat. Don't give up on Sean. I think you're not going to find another GM that's available that will be able to bring in that type of potential that he has right now, that he's built. So let's see what happens.
Unfortunately for me, my morale in Sean Marks has been at an all-time low since the destruction of the big 3. But hopefully, listen, I'm hoping that he can make up for it. I'm not personally ttoo high on the draft lottery for this year. I mean, dealing with the 6th overall pick the last 5 years, it's never jumped up. A lot of people are going to try and say, oh, this is a good thing. It means we're due. But let's also look at Nets history, right? When we've had our own picks, the year that we were the worst team in the league, we didn't get John Wall. We got Derek Favors. We traded him. Didn't even play a game in New Jersey. Another year we were really bad. We landed Brook Lopez, ended up being our best franchise player in terms of points, but again, nothing special. And since then, we haven't had a lottery pick. And the lottery picks that we have given up, we gave Boston number 1, which they traded back to 3 for Jason Tatum. We gave them number 3. They got Jaylen Brown. Another pick that we had given up in the Boston deal ended up going to Portland. They got Damian Lillard. Like, last year, our pick was 9. It jumped up to 3. Houston got Reed Shepherd. Our luck is not great. Like, we are really the bad news bears of luck. So I'm hoping this year it changes. I'm not high on it, but that's kind of why I just want to take it.
It will. You guys are due. Mark this spot.
I'm going to put this in a clip, and we'll come back to this May 12th.
I wanted to ask Dusty a question about you guys have had luck in the lottery. Whenever you've been bad, you got Tim Duncan, then you were good for 20 years, then you were bad, and then you got Wemby. You got two chances at in the lottery, most likely, or at least one. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. What would be really good for the NBA is for Cooper Flagg and for Wemby to play together for the next 15 years. That would be really good for the NBA stacking ratings. It would be great for the NBA here. It'd be great for the NBA in Europe. Have you ever considered that possibility that, like, we've had some luck in the lottery and Wemby, and even if it's not Cooper, if it's Harper or Ace, there's a real possibility that if the balls bounce right, we could be starting another dynasty here in San Antonio.
Yes, that's the plan. That's been the plan. So they've been setting up the dominoes to fall in a certain direction, a certain way, and you've got about a 26% chance that we're going to end up with that top 4 pick. And then even after you do, you have a second pick that may end up being a lottery pick as well. Do you draft 2 lottery type players and add them into this mix? I don't know. I see a very strong possibility that they could trade both those picks and try to move up even, or do something with those picks, go out and get a star. But yeah, like I said earlier, this is about making money, and the NBA loves Wemby. They want to see him succeed. They would love to see a Cooper Flag play with Wemby and win championships and, star all over the world, especially with a new TV deal that demands higher ratings, because we know the ratings have been going down. So, yeah, of course, if you want to believe in conspiracy theories, yes. But I try to keep my feet on the ground here and say, yeah, I like our odds of getting a top 4 pick and contending regardless, at least, building the next level of being a playoff team, a strong playoff team. And if the Spurs, who have said time and again, we want to be like the Oklahoma model, you're going to have to take one step after the other, no shortcuts. But because there are going to be players available, I think you're going to be able to light a fuse on that contention situation and get it faster than even they thought. And certainly when De'Aaron Fox said, I want to go play with Wemby, they made it happen. And here we are. So let's see what happens. I think one good question that I ask a lot of fans is, if this team stays healthy, no changes, but everybody stays healthy, is this a playoff team next year? And most of them would say, yeah, I think there'll be a playoff team next year if everybody stays healthy. So you can build from that. The same thing for the Nets. If everybody stayed healthy and there were no changes, where would you be next year? But realistically, you guys have a lot of draft picks and a lot of assets and a lot of things. So I think the Nets are going to get better. They're going to take a step up. And hey, like I said, mark this tape, because what happens if all of a sudden that number 6 becomes the number 1? Holy cow. That would be awesome.
We will be live for draft lottery night, I'm sure. And if that happens, some crazy things may happen on my end of the screen. So we'll see. But I'm hoping so. The one last question I want to ask you, because I know that you're going to have to head out here shortly.
Yeah.
Draft lottery night. Let's just say, San Antonio lands 3 or 4. The pick is VJ Edgecombe, right? Does that put you in a position where, if Kevin Durant is the real choice for you guys, do you package Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, and somebody else plus a pick or 2 for a KD? Is Stephon Castle like a complete untouchable? Or let's just say you draft a VJ or an Ace Bailey. Do you package that person in the Kevin Durant deal while keeping Stephon Castle?
Stephon Castle's not going anywhere. You already saw it play out during the De'Aaron Fox trade. Sacramento insisted on him, and it was like a poker table. The Spurs sitting across from them and saying, nope, we'll just wait. If you don't want to trade him.
Folding until they came back. Yep.
Yep, until they came back. And De'Aaron's team, the management team, did a great job of getting him to where he wanted to go. Stephon's not going anywhere, man. He's really special. Probably rookie of the year again for San Antonio. So yeah, you don't touch that asset. Not when they've been protecting the other assets these last few years and holding on to their core group of Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. Now Jeremy was probably in that group as well this past year. So you want to see the core play together, learn each other's tendencies, and compete together at a higher level. That's what they're doing. And so I don't see that happening. I would honestly see somebody being more, quote, if we're going to say expendable, and even that is hard to swallow because he's such a good two-way player, and he's starting to show more of that two-way nature, and that's Devin Vassell. And for what you're paying him, which is a contract that's going to pay him less and less in the next 2-3 years, that's like ideal. That's where you are. And again, they want to build a contender that isn't just going to win one time. They want another dynasty, like Gary said, right? So that's what they've got their eyes on, and hopefully the pieces will fall together. Again, the most intriguing thing to me is, how do you get off that ladder of assets? How do you do it efficiently intelligently, and we've never really seen that before in the NBA. So let's see what happens. It'll be an interesting offseason, and it's been a lot of fun, guys. I really appreciate it. I wish I could stay longer and finish out the rest of the next hour with you guys, but I really thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. I love talking hoops with you guys.
Of course, and yeah, we'll keep in touch. I know that there's going to be rumors, flying left and right throughout the playoffs, and as the draft lottery comes closer and draft night. So we appreciate you for joining on today.
Sure.
We'll definitely set something up to try and have you back on, especially if there's a San Antonio move here shortly.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If you want, real quickly, let us know where we can find you on Twitter. This way we can have some people over towards
at Spurs Reporter. Definitely follow me. Like I said, my horizons may be expanding next season where I'll be covering more of the NBA. So we'll see what happens. But it's gonna, from here till next season, man, so many things are gonna happen. And that applies to me personally as well. So we'll see you guys. Thank you.
Having you on, and Tim Duncan is still giving me nightmares from those 03 finals. The 20 games was just, he's still giving me nightmares. Whenever
someone
says Shaq is better than Duncan,
what's weirder is how much time has passed since that.
Years. Yeah,
right.
21 years, 22
Unbelievable,
years.
Man. Anyway, God bless you guys. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Dusty, for joining, man. Talk soon.
You're welcome. Take care.
Well, as always, I appreciate Dusty for joining. Do we want to continue? I know that we wanted to talk potentially some free agency, or are we going to stick that for another day?
Let's stick that for, can you do Sunday?
That should work.
Let's do that for Sunday. I got an electrician coming in about 32 minutes, so I gotta wrap up.
Sounds good. Well, listen, I appreciate you guys for joining in today. We're going to have some more reporters coming in from different teams. From Brooklyn, we're going to have CJ get rescheduled. He dealt with a family matter, so we'll have him on here shortly. Brandon Robinson, Scoop B, we're trying to get him on as well. So I'll keep you guys updated with that. I appreciate you guys for joining. Gary, you want to take us out?
Shout out again to Dusty. That was fantastic. And guys, it's April 18th, 2025 from Texas to the world. Thank you. God bless.
Later.